Hello every pony and welcome to Crisis Equestria reading. Today I'm going to be reading chapter 3. I've got a bottle of water with me because last time my mouth was getting very dry and I think that was hindering my reading. So without any more hesitation, let's begin. Crisis Equestria, chapter 3, Investigation. The Mid-South District had probably... Wow. First sentence and I've already buggered it up. Let's try that again. The Mid-South District had probably the best conditions out of all the mid-districts in the Pandemonium City. It wasn't as nice or as fancy as the Inner District, but it wasn't anywhere near as bad as the slum-like conditions of 3 of the 4 outer districts. It lacked the gleaming skyscrapers that one could see towering over the rest of the city. Those were what made up the inner districts. High-rise lofts and penthouses, high-class office buildings and corporation headquarters, the homes of the rich and famous, and where the most of the ponies that worked for the government lived to avoid mingling with the common rabble, that made the mid-districts. Central Plaza, the busiest subsector in Mid-South, was so close to those kind of conditions one could hope for. Whatever. It was very expensive to live here, even though it was still ridiculously cheap compared to the utopian prices, and still much cheaper than trying to make it in the inner districts. What made it so expensive was that all, not some, all of the most important necessities had their headquarters, their best equipped centres, or even their early locations in the subsector. This has not started well. The new Pandemonium Police Department's central station was here, and was the main building for new Pandemonium registration and documentations. There was also a central database holdings, which at Flattooth's description sounded an awful lot like a library to Twilight Sparkle. New Pandemonium Medical had its largest clinic, Central General. Here and the same could be said for general goods and groceries and the new Pandemonium Fire Brigade. All of them conveniently within relative walking distance to any pony that happened to live in any of the 4 district complexes that made up the borders of the Central Plaza. And if you didn't live in the Central Plaza, well, good luck to you. Besides the horrendous travel time to get to the best medical treatment in the city, in the district excluded, or the city's official library, the police and fire brigade response time was simply atrocious. Flathoof explained that on average it took about 15 minutes or less to respond to a call from within the Central Plaza itself, considering subsector was a few miles square. This was a typical, if slightly slow expectation. If you lived elsewhere in Mid-South, anywhere between 30 and 50 minutes could be expected, even in a severe emergency. Perhaps 60 minutes if you lived near the divider walls. If you lived in either mid-east or mid-west of the NPPD's record... If you lived in either mid-east or mid-west, the NPPD's record time for responding to an emergency call was 90 minutes. And they'd been known to take twice as long. Mid-north, 2 hours minimum. Entire neighbourhoods had burned down in the past because similar pathetically slow response times from the NPFB. Luckily, NPM did not have the same problem. Their early issue was whether the clinic in your subsector had the equipment or experienced personnel that you needed to handle whatever the health issue was. Otherwise, you had to make a trip to the NPM Central General. For that, you had to take the time For that, you'd have to take the time the NPD, PPD, or the NPFB would take to get to you, and double it. Flathoof remembered well when he'd been just a rookie, getting to the scene of a riot nearly 30 minutes after it ended, and that some 20 ponies had been hospitalized, and because of the seriousness of the conditions they had to go all the way back to Central Plaza. Several of them did make it and died en route. It was an event that completely changed his outlook on the way the city worked, and rather how it didn't. It made him rethink the way he would need to work to try and change that. The more I go over it in my head, Flathoof admitted dejectedly, the more I realise that the system just doesn't function right at all. It baffles me to no end. Almost like the city doesn't want to be organised. I can't tell you how many times I've submitted petitions and suggestions and applications to get things fixed up a little bit, and never got a response. Why don't they have any smaller stations in other districts? Twilight Sparkle asked. Surely they would help, wouldn't it? Or surely that would help, wouldn't it? They do have other stations, Flathoof sighed, but they're so understaffed and underworked that we have to respond to more calls from their district than they do. I've considered transferring to another station, but that wouldn't do any good in the end. Then I'd just be as overworked as they are, and wouldn't be able to contribute enough to make it much difference. Yeah, I know every little bit counts, but I'm nearly the only officer in this district that seems to have any sort of real moral code. I can't just up and leave that, not without a really good reason. How about another officer that helped us with the paperwork? Y'all seem to trust her, Applejack asked, still slightly miffed as she looked at her ID photo. How that pony had been able to take a picture at just the precise moment needed to make Applejack look like a country bumpkin without half a brain in her head still boggled her. Snapshot? She's a good mare. Flathoof nodded with a smile at the are you kidding phase Twilight and Applejack were giving him. A bit testy, I'll admit, but she means well, and she's reliable and trustworthy. And that's why I went to her instead of going to the other clerks, or worse, the NPRD. It would have taken days to get through all the forms and roundabout nonsense they'd put you through. I typically try to avoid working the system to my advantage, but, well, U6 needed help, and she knows all the loopholes to go through in order to ensure your files get registered by tonight. Hang on. Need a drink. Oh, that's better. Alright. Is there a reason to rush? Twilight asked. Flathoof gave a concerned frown. If you all didn't have a place to live and such by the end of the day with no official documents, well, NPPD policy is to escort you to the outer districts and set you loose there until your documents clear. When that happens, we'd go looking for you for maybe a few hours. And if we can't find you, you're presumed dead or missing. Most of the time, the assumption turns out true. Good heavens! You just abandoned ponies looking to become citizens here? Atrocious! Rarity huffed with disgust. How does your department live with themselves? And you work for the ponies like that? Oh, right. Flathoof winced slightly at her sting. Look, I don't make the rules, and I certainly don't like a lot of them. If I had the ability to ensure that every pony that didn't get their affairs in order quickly enough was still taken care of, believe me, I would. But I only work out here in this district. I don't work at the Gate District, which is where most of that takes place. I don't have any authority there either. Only the knowledge of what goes on. It's rare for any pony It's rare for any pony to end up in a situation similar to yours. I'm still confused how you managed to get all the way into the mid-district looking like you did, without any pony noticing you. Only in the inner district, he continued, does any pony really care what happens to one another. And that's because they have the money to afford the luxury of that. Even then, from what I've seen the upper crust personally, I think it's all for show and social bravado. It's frustrating, being one of the few who has genuine concern. And Flathoof sighed with a great deal of dejection. At any rate, enough of that now. I don't want to bore you with all my troubles. We're here. Flathoof gestured to the massive domestic complex that would hold their new home, the southeast point. 100 stories tall and covered the entire city block. The 6 mares accompanying him looked up in awe at the sheer size of it. They'd all thought it was other buildings they'd been walking alongside in the past minute, not part of one. As he explained it, it was basically a large collection of small houses all stacked together, and then on top of each other. And they were even more amazed to find that nearly every single little home in that complex could, and usually would, hold anywhere between 1 and 8 ponies each. Nothing big or fancy, usually just a bedroom, a restroom, a small den and a kitchen. Considering the size of the place, Twilight calculated quickly in her head that this building, already at least as big as Princess Celestia's castle, even if organised differently, likely housed as many ponies as the entire city of Canterlot, if not more. If this was just one building, how big was the rest of the city? The sheer magnitude of such a population, far greater than they'd first predicted from walking the streets of what had turned out to be the outskirts of this large subsector, had made their heads spin. This city, did it really hold that many ponies? If it did, well, Twilight gulped in a nervous awe at the prospect of such a number. More ponies living in this city than lived in all of their own Equestria? Impossible. The southeast point, so named because it marked the southeastern corner of the border that surrounded the central plaza, was a large ordinary building coloured a dull, dirty brown with traces of oranges and greys and little dull blue awnings that hung over particular windows, likely those of some importance, and matched the larger one that was over the entrance. While it certainly looked habitable, it didn't look like it was in the greatest of shape. This building had seen better days, but those to be at least a few dozen years back. As Flathoof put it, it was good enough for the city departments. That was all the work they'd put into it. No sense in wasting resources so to make some place look pretty when all the ponies that lived there wouldn't know fancy if it bit them in the flank. The large double doors that led into the building were slightly stained green tint, so it wasn't until they'd entered that they could see just the kind of place they'd be living. Twilight frowned as she quickly tried to readjust her calculations. If the rest of the floors were organised anything like the lobby, then perhaps more ponies lived here than initially thought. It was packed tight, and there was barely enough breathing room for every pony in the group as they walked down the main corridor besides the crowds of other ponies coming and going from the building. Some were leaving for work, other for dinner time, and some were likely coming home from one of those too. Flathoof directed them to follow him in single file, and at his guidance it didn't take long to locate the management office. At the reception counter sat an aged earth pony mare, creamy brown in colour and with greying mane and tail and gaudy forest green pearl necklace that clashed horribly with her otherwise sea green blouse. Her large horn-rimmed glasses reminded Rarity of her own pair back home. "Can I help you?" she asked in a disinterested tone, eyeing the newcomers with mild aversion. The 6 mares looked like they'd just picked their clothes out of a bin and walked out the door. Not much style or grace at all. They seemed all fitting enough, but none of them looked particularly fashionable. The white one, perhaps, that was probably neither here nor there. Not that she was much in touch with modern fashion. Maybe this was what the younger crowd wore these days. The orange one wore some sort of cowboy hat and had a plaid brick red work shirt, making her look like she'd wandered off wandered off the set of some western they were filming out in the wastelands. Or that she worked on one of those farms they had in the south in Utopia. It was certainly dirty enough that she looked like she'd been working in it. Why in Equestria she'd be wearing an outfit like that when neither of those were anything New Pandemonium had the time or place for, that was a different story. Maybe some kind of fetish. Oh, that's not nice. The blue one had picked out what looked like a flight jacket. She must have thought pretty highly of herself and her flying ability to wear an outfit like that just screamed, "Hey, I'm such a good flyer. I'm going to advertise myself." Just by the implication of wearing it. Clearly it hadn't originally been hers either. Perhaps a hand-me-down or something borrowed or stolen. It was a little too big for her, and the sleeves nearly dragged along the floor as she stood there. Let alone if she suddenly decided to start walking. For goodness sake, she was even wearing little goggles with brown leather frames and slightly cracked, dirty blue glass. Did she even wear them? Or were they just something that went with the jacket? The purple one, was she wearing a cape or a sequined vest? What did she think she was? Some kind of stage performer? Magicians' acts were probably the least popular theatre show these last few seasons. The cape wasn't even fancy or decorated. With a dull blue like the vest was, it was much too short, and like the blue one's jacket probably did not originally belong to her either. Perhaps she was merely a former assistant to one of those magicians long ago, and now that she was grown, she was deciding to follow that path. Hang on here. Right. The white one had picked out a frilly pale pink dress and a lilac ribbon that at least made her look the most well dressed in the bunch. Possibly even elegant had the material been made out of something nicer. It almost looked like she used that unicorn magic of hers to put the outfit together from bits of pieces of other outfits. The minor clash of style was apparent enough with some examining. The bows and ribbons were neatly tied in a fancy manner, not at all befitting the state of the dress was in. It was clean, sure, but not exactly like it had just been washed. And the yellow one, she looked not at all keen on being here, or out of the house at all, for that matter. And how could you blame her when she was wearing the much too attractive baby blue blouse and skirt? Attractive was probably the wrong word here, actually. Certainly it would attract attention, but not the kind that word was usually suited to describe. Perhaps promiscuous would be the better term. The skirt was much too short. The girl's cutie mark was peeking out completely. It was odd, considering she did not seem to like the attention she was getting from the numerous stallions in the room, or the occasional mare here and there. But the pink one was the most unique. That was the word, unique. She looked like she'd literally just set a box on the floor labelled clothes, filled it with random articles of clothing, leapt in it, wore whatever she came out with. That green propeller cap did not mesh with the black leather jacket, with the collar popped much too tight, which did not work together with the bright, gaudy yellow t-shirt she wore underneath that had printed on it the logo from a children's program she probably didn't even watch. or worse, actually did watch. Imagine the prospect of a grown mare like that watching a show meant for little foals. Ah, I see what you did there. Was she wearing roller skates too? Why? How did she help? How did those help complete her ensemble in any way? In any possible way? Why, all she needed now is a set of glasses with a false nose and a mustache. Maybe a noisemaker too. And she'd look like she was straight out of some zany cartoon where up was down and black was white. Perhaps she'd forgotten those at home. Yes, I phoned earlier to see about speaking with Mr. Lockwood, Flathoof said sternly. I am assuming you are Officer Flathoof then. He's just finishing up a meeting with an associate and should be done in a few minutes. He asked me to tell you he regrets any inconvenience caused by making you wait. You can all wait in the reception area until he gets here. Thank you. Much obliged, ma'am. Flathoof nodded, ignoring her curt attitude. Come along, ladies. So, this Lockwood fellow, Rarity asked. You mentioned him earlier, as Officer Snapshot was filling out some domicile form. An owner of this establishment, perhaps? Is he a friend of yours? We go back a ways, yes, Flathoof nodded. Went to school together a long time ago. Any time I've ever needed a favour, he's been the pony I went to see first. I don't know how much he can help I don't know how much help he can give me here, but if he can't do anything directly, he'll at least know some pony who can. Hopefully. He's usually pretty good at that sort of thing, though. He sounds decent enough, Twilight smiled. Any friend of yours can't be too bad, right? Pfft, tell that to Snapshot. Oh, pfft, tell that to Snapshot, Applejack huffed. If I ain't never met a pony with such an attitude before. But if old Flathoof says she's on the level, well, I suppose we apparently owe her some thanks. I just hope he's not all super stuffy and fuddy-duddy or anything, Pinkie Pie bounced. Then we'd have another guest for the party. Oh, does he like chocolate cake or vanilla? I prefer strawberry myself, because it's pink and super tasty, just like me. I just hope he's nice, Fluttershy peeped. I've had my fill of other kinds of ponies for more than one day, I think. A moment later, a knock came at the reception room door. A Pegasus with a rich grey coat walked in, wearing a dull brown rain jacket of a lighter shade than his mud-brown mane and tail. Those were neatly combed and short, making him look tidy and neat. He wasn't particularly well built, a little on the lanky side actually, but had a good posture and gait that made him look more fit than weak. Two things really, they all noticed most were his tender golden eyes, firm yet gentle. He certainly looked kind enough, but that seemed a reasonable expectation for a friend of Flathoof. Ah, Lockwood! Flathoof smiled as he trotted over and greeted his friend with a sturdy hoofshake. So glad I was able to get hold of you. How have you been? I'm sorry I was so hasty on the phone. Yes, Flathoof. Lockwood smiled as Flathoof shook his hoof gratefully. Don't fret over it. I'm always willing to do a favour for a friend. You know that. Now then, these are the six mares you told me about? Utopia, eh? Fancy stuff. I'm surprised they even wanted to come here, of all places in Equestria. I suppose I should feel honoured. Yes, these are them, Flathoof nodded. What kind of options are we looking at here? Please tell me you've got some good news for me today. Lockwood thoughtfully tapped his hoof to his chin. Well, you're in luck. We have a few vicinities right now. A few ponies here and there failed to pay their rent again. And there's only so much I can do when other ponies aren't willing to cooperate. One of our larger rooms should accommodate them, but it wasn't actually designed for 6, so it might be a little cozy. But it's all I've got. Now then, the issue of payment. Normally I wouldn't ask right away, but well, I do have obligations to the owners. Gotta treat this completely legit, you understand? Flutter coughed. Not only are they new in town, but they don't actually have any bits on them either. I always thought Utopia used bits too, but maybe I'm mistaken. I was hoping they would be able to work something out here. Lockwood waved a hoof. Say no more. There are enough loopholes in this city's paperwork and tax code that I can probably work out something for them to get their first month rent free. Or at the very least until they find work. Does that sound reasonable? Incredibly, noted Flathoof with a grin. Right, ladies? Oh, most definitely, Twilight smiled. Thank you for your help, Mr. Lockwood. Please, just Lockwood will do. I'm only Mr. when I'm doing business, and this is a favour from my good friend Flathoof. I always take great pride in helping those I care about. No exception here. Now then, before I show you all to your new abode, I would like to let you get adjusted and all that. I believe some introductions are in order, seeing as I'll be your landlord for the next, well, however long you're here. I feel it'd be good to know you all a little better. As has been established, my name is Lockwood. And he bowed. And you all are? Of course. Twilight nodded. I'm Twilight Sparkle, and these are my friends. Applejack? Howdy. Rarity? Charmed. Rainbow Dash? Hey. Fluttershy? Hello? And, hey! Why'd I have to go last this time? Pinky pouted. Then the pout turned into a huge grin. Wait, that means I'm the grand finale! Woo! She bounced a few times. Saving the best for last, and I like the way of thinking. I like the way of thinking, Twilight. Hiya, super cool new friends. I'm Pinkie Pie, and I'm the bestest best party pony in this side of the moon. And probably the other side, too. A pleasure, all of you, Lockwood smiled. Now then, let's go see your room, shall we? They followed Lockwood out of the reception area, Flathoof taking up the rear, and after a short trot down the entry hallway, they entered the main stairway and began to climb up several flights of steps to their new home. Several floors later, the ponies were all mostly exhausted and didn't think they could keep climbing. Stair after stair after stair. It seemed to go on forever and ever. The stairs were dusty and musty and not all pleasant. It was cramped, it was dry, and it was a long climb. The appreciation for a generously given home was slowly beginning to diminish as much as they all hated to admit those kinds of thoughts. Eventually it got to the point where they could not hold their tongues and they had to say something. Hang on. Right. Geez, what are we on, like the 8th billionth floor? Rainbow Dash groaned. I can't believe we're going to have to do this every day. No wonder all the ponies around here look so fit. Stupid tight stairwell. I can't even fly properly in here. I don't need to keep my legs and hoofs in shape. I need my wings. Phooey. Are we there yet? Oh, wait. Are we there yet? It is good exercise, laughed Lockwood, who seemed none of the worse for wear. You'll get used to it soon enough. I know I sure had to. I tell you, I used to live on a higher floor than this, in a much bigger complex. And once you know where your room is, if one of your friends is home, you can always just fly up the window and they can let you in. Are we there yet? Golly. Oh, this is Applejack. Golly, I ain't had this kind of workout in ages. Not since last apple bucking season. Applejack said as she cricked her neck. I reckon this'll be a mighty fine replacement for bucking apple trees, at least for now. Do a lap or two and up and down and should be the same as bucking half a sweet apple acres. How the rest of y'all holding up back there? Heh. You're not feeling tired now, are you, Rarity? Are we there yet? I don't know who's saying that. I hate stairs, Rarity grumbled, out of breath. Hate stairs. I'm going to take out all the stairs in my boutique. Hate stairs. So many stairs. Going to have nightmares about climbing stairs. So many cobwebs. Dust! Stairs are dirty! Hate stairs! Are we there yet? Phew, Fluttershy breathed, keeping her response short, not out of shyness, but desire to conserve breath. It's not so bad, Twilight puffed. I know I needed the exercise, that's for sure. Maybe not this. But Spike was always saying I should get out more. Though, I think I might chalk this up to filling out most of the weekly allotted exercise. Phew! I just wish there was a better ventilation. Rarity's right, this is a bit dusty. Are we there yet? I wish you told me they were this high up, Lockwood. Even Flathoof began to complain. I don't get out as much as I did when I was still a rookie. Haven't had to do this much physical work on duty in a while. Can't even let you talk me in. Can't believe I let you talk me into this. Are we there yet? Me? Lockwood chuckled. I believe it was you who were calling and asking for a favour, old friend. You do well to appreciate the work I'm going to have to do through making this all turn out smoothly. Don't tell me you're getting droopy back there, Mr. Toughest, roughest law pony in Equestria. Are we there yet? Pinkie Pie! Rainbow Dash belted. If you ask one more time, I'll... We're here! Lockwood exclaimed. Finally. As he held Rainbow Dash in place, easily as glad as every pony else for the fact. Room 845. Those first two numbers are in your floor number. The 84th. And the second is your room position on the floor. You're in the 5 o'clock position, assuming the building entrance is at 12 o'clock and the hour hand is pointing at your door. Well, that was pretty orderly numbering convention, Twilight observed. If a bit odd with that last bit. You use a clock face to determine room numbers. Maybe it's easier to figure out your room if you forget the number, I suppose. Lockwood chuckled. If only all rooms were as neatly positioned as yours. I live in room 60 in 845. The superintendent lives in room 02628, not 30, not 25, but specifically 28. No rhyme or reason at all in it. I mean, we almost didn't even come to the agreement on how to decide the 12 o'clock position. Some pony wanted the room closer to the stairwell on each floor to be the 12 o'clock room. Can you imagine? Why don't they just name the rooms by a simple numerical system? Twilight blinked. Because no pony could agree on who got the room whatever one, or if maybe it should be 01, since there are more than 10 rooms on several of the floors. Or if maybe we should start with 00, or if we could call that 00, or is that, or this, or that, and something else, blah blah blah, Lockwood sighed. No ponies seem to take cooperation lightly, I tell you. I asked the same thing when I moved in. Probably most of the things in this city don't make a lick of sense. You just gotta grin and bear it, unless you've got the money to get a flight to Utopia, and can afford to live there when you get there. Well, hang on, aren't you all from Utopia? Why in the heaven's name would you want to leave? I've been trying to save up for a trip for ages. Who's talking? My theory is they're actually refugees from the wasteland. We just used that Utopia cover story to get through the paperwork, Flathoof quickly explained. Didn't want to have to start filling out criminal backgrounds and medical histories because some clerk thought they'd got some sort of mutation out there. They didn't look dangerous or anything, and they seemed like they needed a good home. I had to help, you understand. They look a little too healthy to be refugees, Lockwood said suspiciously. No matter. If they are, I'm more than willing to help them get back on their horse and into a relatively safer environment. And if they're not, well, I suppose they have their reasons for their secrecy. I expect to hear some stories about all the things going on out there. Anyway, ladies, your castle awaits. Their new home was, well, Lockwood had called it cozy and said it wasn't really built for 6 ponies. That seemed all the more true when they got in. It looked like it was built for more than. It looked like it was built more for 3 or 4 at best. It was a fairly decent sized apartment if one were to share with only one more pony. But with 4 it would likely seem a little cramped. With 6 it made it feel more like a hovel than a home. But it was free for now if Lockwood's claims were accurate, and it was being generously given simply because they happened to meet precisely the right 2 ponies in the entire city. Luck was a finicky mistress, but sometimes she worked in mysterious ways. Ugh, Rarity said with a look of displeasure, still trying to catch her breath and shake cobwebs from dust from her mane and tail. Ponies live in this filth? Please tell me this room just hasn't been cleaned recently. Or ever. At least then I'll believe the mess I'm seeing here. Actually, that's pretty true, Lockwood nodded with a frown. We weren't allowed to clean up after the scene of the murder. Police wouldn't let us. I mean, it's already been a full day. We should be allowed to clean up, right, Flathoof? 24 hours is policy, isn't it? The 6 mares stared in disbelief. Fluttershy audibly sniffed and hid behind Applejack, hoping the bigger, stronger mare would protect her from whatever might be lurking around in the nearer corner. None of the 6 could hardly believe what they had just heard. Death was a natural thing in their world, and even though they knew there were bad ponies out there, even back home, that might inflict it upon others out of malice, they didn't expect that to be a common occurrence over here. Kidding, Lockwood chuckled nervously. Just kidding, a joke. Haha. Oh, come on. As if I'd give you a room that some pony had been murdered in only a day before. Ha ha. Ha. Okay, no really, why isn't any pony laughing? Seriously, I use that same joke on every pony that has ever moved in, and you 6 are the first ones not to laugh. Is that something we have to deal with around here? Twilight gulped. Often, we aren't really accustomed to that sort of thing. What, murder? Flutter frowned. I wish I could say we never had to deal with it at all, but in fact it's quite the opposite. I think we've had maybe 7 ponticide calls this week, and that's a pretty low number. Sure, it's not the weekend yet, but I'm not helping things, am I? Oh dear. Listen, this is the safest district in the whole city, apart from the inner districts. But that's cheating to compare us to them. Lockwood swiftly explained, as the whole group looked more and more distressed. We haven't had anything like that happen in, months? And it wasn't anything like, wow, okay, I'm not helping matters either. Fluttershy sniffed and huddled closer to Applejack. This place is scarier than I thought. Now, darling, I'm sure it'll all be okay, Rarity soothed. Come on, let's focus on getting our home cleaned up a little, Take your mind off all those scary things. Yeah, Pinkie Pie bounced. We need to get all the decorations set up for a housewarming party. Let's see, I need streamers and balloons and banners and, cake. A whole lot of plates and cups and maybe like a dozen soda pop cans. Gotta get all super hydrated after that climb. Confetti, noisemakers, a music box, and... Pinkie Pie, we've got more important things to worry about, Rainbow Dash frowned. Besides, this place doesn't look like it would have room for one of your parties anyhow. Are we talking about one of my super duper awesome big birthday bash parties or my ultra fun best friend forever parties? because then, well, duh, I know we don't have room for either of those silly, but this isn't those kind of parties anyway. This feels more like a welcome, every pony welcome party. But depending on the area of the room and the dimensions I have to work with, I might be able to fit in a totally amazing radical blast party, assuming the room is a perfect square, and I might have enough pie, and she snickered loudly at the terrible pun, to go around. But where am I going to find a breakdancing floor at this time of night? Ugh, I cannot read fast-paced with Pinkie Pie's voice. Ugh, give me a sec. Right. Maybe I just sighed. Me and my big mouth. Did Pinkie Pie just invoke mathematics in party planning? Twilight said with absolute staggering confusion. How would that... What could you... Is there even... Oh dear, I think I'm getting a headache. Besides, Pinkie laughed as she slided up close to Rainbow Dash. If I can't fit in a room for even a little bitty teeny tiny just us friends housewarming party, we can always have our own little private party later, Dashy. Always plenty of room for one of those. You just gotta be quieter than... Rainbow turned red. Pinkie Pie? Jeez! What's all this talk about parties? Lockwood blinked. The Pink One's special talent is throwing parties, Flathoof whispered. She likes parties a lot, and singing and dancing and games and parties. Did I mention parties? Yes, we went over this a lot back at the station. He subtly twirled his hoof in a circular motion around his ear, taking care not to let her or her friends notice. Ah, Lockwood nodded in total understanding. Well, ladies, what say we start getting your home all spruced up, Thank God for a time wipe. This is getting harder to read, and it's 42 minutes and we're about halfway. Snapshot sighed dejectedly and eyed the clock on the wall. 1 more hour. That's how long it would take for her to get out of this droll little job and back home, where she could enjoy herself and try to get some work done on her hobbies. Today had apparently been the most stressful and working day she'd ever had to endure in her last year as a desk clerk on the NPBD. If Flathoof weren't such an illegible bachelor, she'd have passed it on to her co-worker sitting at the desk several paces to her right. All that work and hassle wasn't worth her time, but doing little favours like that here and there for Flathoof, well, she hoped it might get her in his good graces, so that maybe he'd want to get in her good graces. She eyed the other mare, the pink Pegasus with a silvery white mane streaked with gold. That dye job was so tacky, with disintegrated contempt. Firecracker! Oh, how Snapshot wished that blasted mare would just up and fly away and never darken these halls again. With her bow-legged, hip swaggering, obviously had a wing job self. Always stealing all the good-looking stallions in the department, the hussy. Snapshot knew that she had seen Golden Star first. She had been flirting with him so casually in the break room that she had been the one who asked him out. Firecracker had even been sitting just a table or two away in the cafeteria when she did it. And then the jerk went and broke it off the last second after Snapshot had gone through the hours of making herself look presentable and attractive and desirable. And the next day he was over there at Firecracker's desk, playing with her hair and whispering sweet nothings in her ear. Third time this month she'd seen a stallion at that desk, and it was always a different one. Snapshot sighed in dejected disapproval of herself. For months she'd been trying to get the attention of one of these stallions around the department, and learned the hard way that most of them were really not worth her time. Crooks, liars, cheats and sneaks and perverts, the lot of them. She was desperate, but not that desperate. No, now there were only a few stallions left on the entire force that were worth any attention, at least physically and mentally, but no, they just had to be in relationships already. That was just the way things worked, that all the good-looking, well-mannered stallions were the ones taken, wasn't it? Except one, and he didn't seem interested at all in any pony. Of all the rotten luck, the most good-hearted and certainly broadest stallion of the entire force was just not looking for any pony special to share himself with. Snapshot would give anything for Flathoof to take her the way she looked to him, and cursed the fact that she'd probably drifted so far into the friend zone by now that she'd need a map and a 3 weeks worth of supplies just to find her way out. Oh, Captain, my Captain. And in an instant, Captain Flathoof, sweeping her off her feet, was almost a distant memory. As much as she wanted him to be hers, she knew that being hopeful and ignoring opportunities was worse than noticing the little things in life and trying to find love elsewhere. And some pony else had just walked into her life. And was he ever a different story? Lean and athletic, and so suave. Oh, and that uniform. The impeccable black suit and tie combination reminded her so of the secret agents and spies from her novels. She recognised that anywhere. If all the committee investigation agents looked that good, maybe she'd consider applying sometime after she had more on her resume. Or a resume, I don't know. She certainly had a broad knowledge of the system's inner workings that she knew was one of their requirements. All she was lacking was experience. Oh my, and he was quite literally walking into her life now. He was walking towards her desk. Oh dear, was her hair straight? No smudges on her glasses? Her breath was okay, wasn't it? You must be Miss... And the well-dressed Pegasus looked at a report file that he had opened. Snapshot, correct? Uh-huh, she nodded in a daze. I mean, yes, that's me. How may I help you, Agent Sparkwalker? He nodded. I'm with the CIA. I need to speak with you about a recent registration you filled out in regards to some suspicious information. Oh wow, he's Shadow Walker. Sparkwalker, really? Is that the best... Oh, which one? Which 6? The agent said in a hushed whisper as he plopped the report file on the table. Snapshot's eyes widened. Those 6 mares had been there only a few hours before. Wow. The CIA sure worked fast. The paperwork had literally been teleported to the NRPD not more than 4 hours ago. She'd never heard of anything that made the CIA this interested. Oh, what if Flathoof was in trouble, and these 6 men were criminals? Or worse, terrorists? I recognise them, yes, she nodded, mirroring his quiet tone. What kind of information do you need? Is there somewhere more private we can talk? He said, with a slight grin. She couldn't be sure, but if it had her in his place, she'd have looked more quickly at Firecracker and back again, hinting at not being able to speak around another officer. She was certainly he had likely done the same. But those sunglasses he was wearing prevented that. Why was he wearing sunglasses in Pandemonium? The sun never shined here. And inside? Maybe that was part of the uniform. Why was she worrying about that? He wanted the 2 of them to be alone, and that grin on his face. She got the feeling that this was going to be her lucky day. Ah, opportunity. How loud your knock could be. Wait, where am I? I've lost my place. Here we go. Certainly. Follow me, she waved as she headed towards the back of the clerk's office. The Pegasus followed her into the staff room, and after making sure no pony was coming this way, she closed and locked the door. Ah, privacy. "So what's this all about?" she asked as she sat in the neat, cosy office chair. Agent Sparkwalker remained near enough that she could actively drink in all his features, as she found herself enjoying every minute of it. And he took out a small notepad and set it on the table, just out of her sight, then set up his pen upon that. "Business before pleasure," she thought dejectedly. Right. "The committee is concerned about the status of their case file. It would seem that the police chief smokestack applied for a pay increase that arrived literally 5 minutes after these six forms came in. While this normally wouldn't be too troubling, Smokestack does these kind of thing all the time, does he not? Are you asking me?" She pointed a hoof at herself. I don't get involved with much of the chief's business." Sparkwalker nodded, jotting down a few notes, holding the pen in his mouth and the notebook steadied on the table. "No matter. This is about the 6 ponies of interest anyway. Our department is concerned with the speed of which their forms were filed and documented, and we suspect that perhaps the chief was rushing things along to just get the wage increase, and may have overlooked things concerning them. Now, your name is on the form as identification photographer as their file clerk, so I believe it is safe to assume that you had some interaction with them?" Yes, I did." She nodded, somewhat nervous that he would learn that she'd sped the paperwork along at Flathoof's request, not the chief's. Oh crap. I've lost my way. Oh, the scrolling on my laptop is terrible. Hang on, right. "If it's okay with you then, I'd like to ask you a few questions about them. You can tell me some details about them, yes?" I hope so," she nodded. What's this all about, anyway? I mean, not to pry." "Committee business, I'm not supposed to tell," he said shortly. "Please, a fellow officer I know is their parole officer. I want to make sure he'll be, okay, sir." "His name?" "Flatoof, Captain Flatoof." I'll make sure we take care of him should the need arise," he nodded. "Now then, let's start at the top according to the order you filled the forms out, based on your timestamps. First, Twilight Sparkle. What can you tell me about her?" "Real bossy. Seemed well educated," Snapshot said with a slight sneer. "Probably the brains of the group if you ask me. Oh, I'm sorry. I know I'm not supposed to figure my personal opinions into this. The scrolling on my laptop is terrible. How far down did I freaking go? Oh, fucking hell. Here we go. Sparkwalker smiled. While I didn't ask, your information is valuable and will help our investigation. Please feel free to relax and speak honestly. Candidly. I know we have a lot of your information on these forms, but just speak freely. Don't feel like repeating anything they said seems redundant. Normally, we don't hold any interest in the personal opinions of those we interview, but I'm making a special case about this one. It may help us understand the psyche of these 6, you understand?" Yes, sir." "And drop the sir nonsense. Just Sparkwalker, if you please. Snapshot?" he said with a grin. Right, Sparkwalker." She blushed. "Oh, they were already on the first name basis. She wasn't used to the idea of a CIA agent being so informal. That was a major part of their job, being really rigid and uncooperative. But maybe this one liked her. Maybe if she played her cards right, she'd have plans tonight." "Well, she was kind of a busybody asking all sorts of she was kind of a busybody asking all sorts of questions and trying to learn more about the city. I mean, sure, I guess that makes sense if you're not from around here, but still, The others weren't quite as inquisitive or even interested. Just left the work to her. Said she used to work as a librarian, so if I had to venture, I guess she'll probably work to the CBH or something similar. Go on then. The next pony, Rarity. She seems to be posing for this picture. Yeah, she insisted on making a glamorous shot. Snapshot chuckled. I'll be fair, she has a good look to her, and if it weren't for the stupid jumpsuit, she might look pretty charming. Really snooty though, kind of gave me a hard time making sure I was getting all her physical details right. Seemed like a neat freak. Kept insisting she was a fashion designer back home, which struck me as extremely odd, since they weren't wearing any clothes when they got arrested. According to the reports I attached, I mean, whoever heard of a fashion designer wandering around nude? Not even like a scarf or a bow or anything. Contradictory, eh? You'd think she'd be wearing something at all times, even if we didn't have the law. Self-advertisement, that kind of thing. Sparkwalker nodded, and jotted down some more notes. Let's see, Fluttershy. She looks like she didn't want to take the picture at all. Did she give you a hard time? Oh, brother. It took me 3 times longer to get her form filled out. She was very uncooperative. Had to ask every question at least twice for her to be able to hear her. Rarity, really quiet, really shy, kind of spoke in peeps and mumbles, and always tried to avoid making eye contact. Kind of cute in a way, probably gets a lot of lookers back where she comes from. Says she was a veterinarian. A veterinarian? Whatever the hey that is. Something to do with the military? Veterans and all that? Does Utopia even have a military anymore? Animals. An army of animals? Snapshot raised an eyebrow. Please tell me you're kidding. What? Oh, no. A veterinarian. They're like doctors for animals. Common practice over in Utopia, is what I hear. Moving on then, Pinkamena Diane Pie? Sorry, I didn't see the note under the alias. Pinkie Pie is her preferred name then. Is she doing a cross-eyed on purpose, or does she have some sort of condition? Yes, on purpose. And what a mouth that one's got, Snapshot huffed. Just would not shut up. Yap. Gave me such a roundabout long answers that so many of the questions told me this ridiculous story when I asked her. Gave me such roundabout long answers to so many of the questions. Told me this ridiculous story when I asked her about her special talent. Some spiel about a rock farm at a party, then claimed it was like the origin myth or something. Not right in the head, that one. But she made me a little suspicious, and not just because she seemed a few cards short of a deck, but either. While every pony else in the group said they were from Utopia right away, and Twilight Sparkle even added their ridiculous district into it, Ponyville, still makes me laugh. This Pinkie Pie character, she kind of hesitated a little. It was really subtle because I wouldn't have noticed it if she hadn't been such a motor mouth otherwise. Made me think she was really wanted to say something else and realised her mistake just before she made it. Now that I think of it, so did that orange one. Applejack, was it? She didn't say Utopia right away either. Seemed kind of pained that she had to do it. Makes me think maybe their story isn't as true as they claim. Nothing gets past my sleuth sense, and she gave a proud little smile. Very astute. I'll make note of your suspicions, Sparkwalker smirked. You've been very helpful so far, Snapshot. Thank you. Oh, are we done? She frowned. Oh no, not quite yet. Just thought I'd thank you for being so helpful to my investigation. He nodded, tilting down his eyeglasses ever so slightly so that she could see him wink. Snapshot turned red and coughed into her hoof. She felt rather embarrassed that he was pushing all the right buttons. I was a little nervous that he knew what buttons to push. Now then, the next one. Rainbow Dash? Really full of herself. Big ego, took everything I said as a challenge. Fastest flying Equestria? Really? That I find difficult to believe. When I said as much, she started getting a little riled up, like she wanted to prove it right then and there. I've seen some pretty fast flyers in the NPPD, and she didn't look like anything special. And her response to my asking about it was that she's the only pony to ever pull off the sonic rain boom? What the hey is that? Some sort of sonic boom mixed with a rainbow? How would you even do that? Seems physically impossible to me. And if you look under alias, I noted Dashi as a nickname rather than a preferred name. The pink pony kept calling her that, and was the only pony doing it that I could see. I don't know. I got kind of weird vibe from the two. Maybe they're like, more than friends? Really? God damn it, they're mixing fanfictions up now. I knew Pinkie Pie was suggesting something later when talking about the private party. God damn it. Interesting. One more then. Tell me about this Applejack. Don't even get me started on her, Snapshot growled. Ugh, I saw the way she was looking at Flathoof. Not that matters. She quickly added that so that Spark Walker wouldn't get the wrong idea, even if it was the right idea. She just didn't want him to think it was he's my friend is all. Don't want to see him get hurt because of some utopian gazebo. She didn't want him to think it was he's my friend is all. Don't want him to see him get hurt because some utopian gazebo gives him that look and thinks she can just waltz and flutter her eyes and land a prize stallion on the NPPD in her blunk when I've been anyway, she was honest enough, didn't have any problems answering everything straight away. Except that Utopia bit I mentioned earlier had a real thick accent that made it hard to get everything understood at first. Had to tone down a lot of the bigger words too. She must be the dumb muscle, that's my guess. Yes, very good, he nodded, as he wrote down the last few notes. I understand they also filed domicile registration forms? You wouldn't happen to have a copy of them anywhere, would you? Oh, sorry, I don't, she frowned. It's still in processing, I think. Your department should get it in a few hours, I'd hope. I rushed it along pretty well. I'm surprised the other forms got to you guys that fast, really. Well, I was hoping to get a copy sooner than that, he pouted. We're in hot pursuit of these mares, see? I can't tell you exactly why, of course, but I assure you that the faster I can find out where they are, or where they may be headed, the faster I can catch up to them and find out exactly what they're doing. Snapshot frowned. If Agent Sparkwalker was delayed, it might be putting Flathoof at risk, and she didn't like the fact that she would be partly responsible. As much as she was attracted to this new pony, well, she still cared for the captain, and wanted to make sure nothing happened to him. I can remember some of the things on the forms I filled out. Not every detail, but I assume anything would help, right? Most assuredly, he nodded quickly. Any assistance you can give in my investigation would be greatly appreciated. Well, I remember a name, Southeast something Park Place? Point? Sparkwalker hinted. Southeast Point. I recognize the name. Most suspicious that they would be able to get a room so quickly in the busiest, most expensive part of the district. With a record even. Snapshot frowned again. Captain Flathoof is the one who helped them get it. He said he had a friend who was in well with the owners. Lock something. He was just trying to help. I don't think he suspects anything about them at all. Oh, I'm sorry, that's all I can remember. Perhaps they have fooled your friend better than you thought. But I'm getting ahead of myself. A few more questions before we're all finished here. First, apart from what you mentioned specifically about them each individually, did you notice anything suspicious about them as a group? Well, like I said, their home sounded a little odd. I mean, Ponyville has to be a made-up name. And a really lame one at that. Next thing you know, we'll be hearing about vacations to Phillyburg, or celebrities living in Stallion Town and buying some beachfront property in Colt City. Pfft. So you don't think they're from Utopia? Well, I mean, no, I don't. But where else can they be from? The wastelands? Like refugees or something? They didn't look violent, she admitted, though she was still suspicious and knew the appearances could be deceiving. And they seemed pretty healthy enough, physically at least. No mutations or deformations or anything. Still, I mean, how could they be from Utopia? They'd have to be taken on aerial route, and surely they would have been told they needed clothes here. And I know I don't just give out identification cards, but the NRPD has a station at the gate. How'd they get past it into the city without going through that? Seems odd. Very astute observations, Spywalker smirked as he wrote down more notes. Our department was thinking much of the same. We just needed confirmation from some pony. And it is good to hear that we are not alone in our suspicions. You'd make a fine addition to the CIA one day, were you ever so inclined, he added with a wink. I'd put in my personal recommendation. And one final question, Snapshot. Yes? When do you get off? I beg your pardon? She blinked. She must have misheard that. No. He still had the coy grin on his face, like he was trying to use his eyes to remove her uniform. It made her feel a little vulnerable, feel wanted. Must be lonely working these late nights here at the police station day after day. Must be exhausting. You must crave the feeling of release when your shift is up. I'm afraid I've probably kept you well past your normal hours. I'll make sure you don't get in trouble with your payroll over it. I suppose, she blushed, trying to keep her cool. Too fast, this was happening, too fast. She couldn't... Should she feel worried, relieved? But she'd given up opportunities worse than this, for dumber reasons. And she was not about to pass up this stallion just because she felt it was a little impulsive. Sparkwalker smiled and removed his sunglasses, neatly placing them into the jacket of his tidy black suit. She became slightly distracted by getting to see his eyes in full, a vivid green haunting in a way. She almost didn't hear him speak. But then again, she wasn't paying much attention to his words so much as his actions. Was she daydreaming again? All that flirting, had it been real? She was worried she was looking too far into it, or that he was just using the advances to try and weasel more information out of her. And tactics, she admitted, worked. You look so pent up, he breathed. So tense. Please, allow me to ease that tension, even for just a moment. Strong hoof on her shoulders kept her in place. A tender caress. This was so sudden. Too sudden. But she didn't want it to stop. He was so perfect. She was so willing to forego any sense of worry. Any sense of wondering. Why would a stallion like this be interested in me? Was completely gone. She couldn't care any less. He was doing so much with those hoofs of his that she'd completely fallen out of her reality and become entranced in this living fantasy, such that nothing mattered anymore. It was not her first kiss, but it may as well have been. He was so delicate, not at all rough or sloppy or dull like some of her previous college friends had been. She barely even noticed him unfastening his tie, or unbuttoning his uniform. Things were moving fast. They'd only just met. It was just like one of her steamy romance novels, right from the beginning to now middle, and she was hoping soon the end. But I hardly even... If you want to think of this as your dream come true, by all means, he said with a low laugh that made her heart flutter. It was like he knew. Sparkwalker roughly pulled her out of the chair, and she found herself pinned heavily on the floor of the office on top of the rounded floral patterned rug. She'd never been more glad that the door was locked and that the windows were tinted. Her glasses fogged at his hot breath, and for a moment she forgot herself, and found she was unable to resist pleading for his advances. Her own hoofs gripping at his mane and chest. She could feel his smile on her neck, tasted his voice. "One last thing, Snapshot," his husky voice came. Yes? What?" she breathed hotly. "Have you told any pony else what you've told me here today?" "No, pony," she winced. "Please, be gentle. No promises." First the tenderness of a kiss on her neck, and then a severe blinding pain. A hoof over her mouth, silencing her dull scream. The blade delicately pierced her carotid artery. She looked up, pleading in those heartless green eyes. How could a face that handsome have been some pony capable of this? His coat and mane began to dim. No, that was her vision doing that. Blue. She could see blue and black. So much black. The blood loss was making her woozy. She tried to buck out of his grip, but she couldn't find the strength. She tried to cry out, but no sound came. The agony was unbearable. It bled far beyond physical pain. She could feel pangs of mental and emotional anguish rise. She felt like she'd just committed some great sin, and by thinking she was helping him, she'd felt likely just endangered the one pony she knew she'd never been distracted from. Flatoof, Shh, he cooed into her ear. "It'll all be over soon, my little shutter bug. Now be a sweetheart for me. Just close your eyes. That's a good girl." Snapshot's eyes dimmed, and the last of her life drained away in a pool of blood on the rug, stained in deep, dark red. He smiled toothfully, maddened grin to himself as he stood over the lifeless body, cracking his neck as if feeling of a great load of stress flowing out of him. He enjoyed his work ever so much. The little twitches of the victim as they felt their life's blood just drip away. The flickers of emotion that sparked in their eyes as their hearts stopped. To him, it was like a beautiful mural, with himself as the artist, his victim as the canvas, and their blood as the paint. It was an almost excruciating high, the knowledge that another soul's flame had been snuffed from the world, and he relished this particular taste of having denied her a great desire when it was mere inches from her grasp. The euphoria passed after but a moment. His features hardened, and he set himself back into his work rather than his pleasure. What was important now was getting rid of the evidence. Snapshot needed to disappear, lest she tell other ponies about a CIA agent asking her questions about those 6 new citizens they just registered. This would attract all sorts of attention, and perhaps the officers accompanying them. This Flathoof would somehow catch word of it and try to interfere. It was easy enough to see that either he was in cahoots with the Sixmers, or he was just dumb as a sack of bricks and believing their story. Worse, the CIA might get wind of it, and knowing they didn't send an agent, would investigate the matter. After all, they'd been more interested in the case because of Chief Smokestack's payroll increase. But if they thought the 6 mayors were of some critical importance, then that would greatly complicate matters. They wouldn't question why a CIA agent was there in the first place. They worked so slowly, they'd figure it was probably from a case of several months ago they'd finally gotten round to and forgotten all about it. Shadowstep laughed quietly to himself. The committee sure had its priorities straight. Well, one job finished. He'd gotten information from his targets that would likely be useful in the future, should they turn to require his delicate handiwork rather than just his ever-watching eyes. He even knew where they lived, and who they were with what should that information prove useful as well. They might try to stand in his way, and knowing how to remove them from the equation was also a great boon. And with the little NPPD clerk, a lifeless mass on the floor here, though he'd soon have to take care of that easy enough, no pony would be able to warn them either. As for the chronomancer, whoever they were, it was only a matter of, well, they'd be dealt with soon enough. Well, that's chapter 3 over with. So things are getting sinister, really. Yeah, I guess we'll have to see how things turn out. Thank you for listening. It's been an hour and 16 minutes. That's not really good, but you can always come off the video and go back to it. You just need to note down the time. And yes, that's me done for today. Join me next time, and until then, keep spreading the magic of friendship.